Welcome to ECED 403-503. We are going to talk about instructional strategies, or a few instructional strategies in this video. So let's go ahead and get started. First, when planning any effective instructional strategies, we need to identify what we are going to be teaching. This is one of the most important steps, is the time and attention that we spend planning our lessons. What exactly do we want to teach? Those are our objectives. What are we looking at for this small lesson plan that we are planning on implementing in our classroom? And what standards do those objectives match up with when we're looking at our grade level? Whether it's the SOLs, the foundation blocks, the milestones, the Head Start standards, or if you are outside of Virginia, it could possibly be the Common Core standards. So what exactly are you intending on teaching? We're being intentional here. What do you want to teach? What standards do those objectives match up with? And how does this fit into your overall long-term and short-term plans? Those are all important. For in most school divisions, you have curriculum maps. So you have or pacing guides, where you should be at any given point in the year in each subject or in each domain. So you want to look at those long-term plans. You want to look at those, then you want to break it down into short-term plans. What are you going to do by quarter? What are you going to do by week? And then where do your individual lesson objectives and standards fit? So, and we'll talk about long-term and short-term planning towards the end of the course. But again, when we're thinking about instructional strategies, you just want to put it all together into the big plan and the big scope of the school year, and then narrow it down into individual lessons, taking backward steps all along the way. Also, when we're looking at planning effective instruction, we want to look at assessment. Assessment is something ongoing. Assessment, progress monitoring, that is something that we do throughout the year, the school year. It's not just the fall testing, the January testing, and the end of the year testing. We want to be looking at progress monitoring across the span of the year. And when we're looking at effective instructional strategies, some of this is going to help us with what we do in our lessons, how we assess attainment of our objectives in these individual lessons, and again, how does that fit into the overall plan for the year? So assessment can be a little bit more complicated because we're looking at assessment of our individual lesson and how that assessment fits within the bigger or broader picture of our long and short-term plans. So just keep that in the back of your mind as we talk about these instructional strategies. Now, we're not going to do this obviously because this is an online class, but I want you to think about this. And if you were to do this activity in the class, in your university class, how do you define effective? How do you define an effective instructional strategy? And what instructional strategies do you think are effective? So take a minute, stop, and think about what effective means and what instructional strategies do you know already, based on your readings, based on your field experience, based on your own experience in the classroom. Think about that for a few minutes. Now, let's talk about a couple of strategies that have been found to be effective, meaning that when they are looked at or assessed or researched, they're found to move student achievement forward. That's how we're going to define effective instructional strategies. One thing that is important to understand is that not all effective instructional strategies will be effective for all learners. For the most part, we really need to individualize our instructional strategies. We will have whole group strategies, we will have small group strategies, and we will have individualized strategies. So it's really important for us to know what works for our children, our students as a whole, what works for them in small groups, and what works for individual students as well. So one of the first things that we can do is engage students in learning and activate their prior knowledge. Rather than jumping into the lesson or an activity right away, we want to set those children up for success right from the very beginning. The first thing we want to do is engage them, and that's not on this slide, but it will be on a subsequent slide. We want to engage them and hook them and get them ready for learning. We want to activate prior knowledge. We want to see what they already know and connect this new learning with what they already know. So they've got some of those connections, neural connections, already starting, and we're activating those neural connections. Grouping is a very important and effective instructional strategy. How are we going to group our students for our lesson? And are we going to have different groups in a different context throughout the lesson? And that moves right into context and location. Where are we going to conduct this lesson? Some lessons will be in the classroom. Some lessons will be outside of the classroom for various reasons. Are we going to do a nature walk? Are we going to do something outside at recess? Are we going to do something on a field trip? What are we going to do? Is it in the classroom? Is it somewhere else in the school? Is the context a small group, a large group, individualized? Is it centers? Is it based at their desks? What is the context and what is our grouping situation? Both of those need to be thought about, and small group, whole group, one-on-one, in the classroom, outside the classroom, those have all been found to be effective instructional strategies. We need to match them with our objectives and our standards. What is appropriate for a specific lesson? We also need to balance for our instructional strategies, both child-initiated and teacher-initiated instruction has been found to be effective. When we look from a developmentally appropriate practice, we want to make sure that we're integrating enough child-initiated or child-centered instruction with teacher-initiated or teacher-guided instruction. Again, look to your objectives. Which is going to be the most effective? How can we integrate child-initiated or child-centered instruction with teacher-initiated to meet those objectives? Individualization. Some of our children need different supports and services to be successful in the classroom. So individualization is always an effective instructional strategy. And within that individualization, extension and reteaching may be necessary. And again, another effective instructional strategy. For your children who learn the concepts quickly and need to be taken to a higher level, what is that extension that you're going to do for that lesson, that individual lesson? And for those students who struggle with those concepts, what are you going to do to reteach that objective to ensure that the students master the concept or skill that you're trying to teach? So again, these are very broad, but these are some effective instructional strategies that you want to make sure that you are including in your individual lesson planning. Activate prior knowledge, group, context, or location of the lesson, whether it's child-initiated or teacher-initiated, and how you balance those two. Individualization, providing the appropriate supports and services to ensure that students are successful, and any extensions and reteaching that you might need to do to support your diverse learners in your classroom.